The stars shimmered beyond the armored viewports of the alien flagship, sharp as razors against the void. Admiral Krivax leaned back in his command chair, mandibles clicking in faint irritation. Another colony stripped, another dreary victory. He had expected humanity to scream louder, to flail against the inevitable, but they had yielded too quickly, retreating from their fragile little settlements with barely a whimper. The campaign had become tedious. "They abandoned their dwellings before our boots even touched the ground," muttered one of his lieutenants, a thin-voiced officer whose scales glinted a dull green in the command lighting. "The only resistance we've found is sentimental, grieving over their possessions, their pets. Truly pathetic." Krivax allowed himself a small exhale of amusement. Sentiment. It makes them weak. We conquer while they mourn toys and furred vermin. The report screens flickered with images of the latest raid. Human homes torn apart, personal artifacts scattered, a few stubborn soldiers captured. What caught Krivax's attention, however, was a bizarre scene replayed from the ground. His troops had surrounded a small, hissing creature, quadrupedal, with sleek black fur and amber eyes glowing like embers. The humans had resisted with unusual ferocity for such a trivial matter. Some had even attempted to bargain, their weapons still in hand. The lieutenant tilted his head toward the display. "They called it a cat. When one of ours seized it, the humans nearly broke formation. They begged." He snorted, a wet sound that passed for laughter. "Over an animal." A ripple of laughter swept the bridge. Even Krivax's mandibles curled in sardonic mirth. "A fitting trophy, then. Hold the creature. Perhaps the humans will finally learn to kneel when we remind them their cherished pets belong to us now." Down in the captured quarters of the station, the cage had been hastily fashioned from scrap plating and force fields. The cat crouched low, tail lashing, eyes glowing with an intensity that unsettled even the hardened soldiers. One tried to prod it with a gloved finger, the hiss that answered was sharp as shrapnel. The soldier jerked back, muttering curses, while his comrades laughed at his flinch. When Captain Alara appeared on the holoscreen to negotiate, her posture was ramrod straight, her face calm. She did not rage or weep as the Admiral expected. She only asked, in a voice quiet and steady, "Release the animal." "Now." Krivax leaned forward, savoring the moment. "You mistake the balance of power, human. We hold your colony. We hold your soldiers. And we hold this cat. You are in no position to issue demands." Her gaze never wavered. "That's not a demand. That's a warning." The bridge erupted in derisive chuckles. The lieutenant muttered something about human melodrama, and another officer imitated a pitiful mule, drawing further laughter. Krivax silenced them with a gesture, staring into the human's eyes. She showed no anger, no fear, only certainty. That, more than anything, unsettled him. When the transmission cut, Krivax waved a claw dismissively. "Send her away. They think courage is conveyed through riddles. Soon they'll learn obedience." The alien commander turned back to the viewport, though unease lingered in the corners of his thoughts. Humanity had been curiously quiet in the face of these raids. Too quiet. Normally, conquered peoples raged, pleaded, bargained. Humans abandoned settlements with unnatural calm, leaving empty cities behind, as if they expected the pillaging. He shook the thought off. They were primitives, clever perhaps, but ultimately outmatched. His empire had devoured species far more advanced. Hours later, as the station settled into its artificial night cycle, the smell began. Acrid, pungent, impossible to ignore. A stench of char and sour air seeped into the corridors. The soldiers who had been tasked with the cats keeping complained first. The creature rejected the protein rations they shoved into its cage, shredded the bedding provided, and hissed at anyone who approached. Its waste fouled the air, mingling with recycled oxygen until the entire wing reeked of something sharp and rotten. Krivax received the reports with mounting irritation. "It is a beast. Handle it," he snapped. But the odor spread regardless, riding the ventilation systems, seeping even into the command deck. Officers wrinkled their noses. The Admiral's own throat burned from it. A trivial annoyance, yes, but an annoyance that would not go away. One young officer suggested spacing the animal. Krivax considered it, mandibles twitching in thought, then dismissed the idea with a sharp hiss. "No. It amuses me to see them squirm over something so insignificant. Let it live." He paused, a cruel spark in his eyes. "Perhaps we will parade it before them when we break their final world. Imagine their despair." In the hours that followed, the station's mood soured. Soldiers muttered about the smell, about the unnatural glare of the cat's eyes, as though it understood far more than it should. Some swore it tracked their every move, its gaze like a blade. Others complained of unease, of dreams filled with fire and shadows. Kryvax dismissed it all as weakness of discipline. Yet, deep inside, the seed of discomfort had been planted. He stood alone before the viewport once more, stars glinting cold beyond the glass. His claws tapped the railing in a restless rhythm. He thought of the human captain's calm voice, of her warning that had not sounded like a threat, but rather a certainty, a fact awaiting confirmation. And he thought, against his will, of that creature pacing in its cage, waiting. The smell of ash seemed to linger even here, faint but undeniable. Kryvax forced himself to breathe deeply, as if to prove he was unshaken. Still, the thought came, unwelcome and persistent. What if the humans were not mourning at all? What if they were waiting? He exhaled sharply and turned away. Tomorrow would bring more raids, more victories, more spoils. The humans would yield as always. He would not be rattled by superstition, nor by furred vermin or empty warnings. Yet when the lights dimmed across the command deck, he could not quite banish the sense that something irreversible had begun. And somewhere in the shadowed wing of the station, the cat sat silently in its cage, golden eyes unblinking, as if it knew exactly what was coming. The Drexery station drifted in orbit above the hollowed colony, its engines thrumming with the rhythm of victory. Inside, life carried on with the arrogance of the conqueror. Soldiers joked about the humans' obsession with their pets. Engineers argued over rations, and the reek of the imprisoned cat seeped through the ventilation shafts, souring the recycled air. Admiral Kryvax ignored the complaints, though even he felt the sting in his throat. The beast was beneath his notice. Humanity itself was beneath his notice. And yet, when the latest reports arrived, he found his mandibles tightening in agitation. Entire patrol fleets had vanished. Not destroyed, not crippled, gone, as if the stars had swallowed them whole. Ships with thousands aboard had slipped into silence, comm channels dead, transponders extinguished. The lieutenant who presented the findings shifted uneasily under Kryvax's gaze, scales glistening with a nervous sheen. We have no wreckage, no distress calls, no indication of battle. They are simply absent. Kryvax dismissed it at first. Space was vast and treacherous. Accidents claimed vessels. Mutiny was not unheard of among lesser commanders. Still, unease wormed its way deeper when the disappearances multiplied. Within a single cycle, 3 more fleets ceased to respond. The first transmission from humanity came soon after. Not a plea, not a surrender, but a calm, deliberate message. A woman's voice, unmistakably the same Captain Alara who had warned him before, echoed across the bridge. The hostage is irrelevant. What matters is what you revealed to us, your arrogance. You believed us fragile. You believed our retreats were cowardice. In truth, we were patient. That patience is over. The broadcast ended. No demands, no threats. Only the certainty of judgment passed down. For the first time, silence gripped the command deck. Officers exchanged wary glances, their amusement curdled into unease. Kryvax stared at the dead holoscreen, mandibles pressed tight. He thought of the woman's eyes, steady, unwavering, and of the creature in its cage, still pacing, still watching. He felt as though the two were somehow bound, emissaries of the same inscrutable will. A flicker of doubt gave way to anger. A performance, he spat. Psychological tactics. They hope to rattle us. Humans are incapable of such precision. They are prey. He said it as much for himself as for his subordinates, and the silence that followed revealed they were not convinced. When his chambers fell quiet that night, Kryvax could not sleep. He ordered access to the restricted human archives, files gathered from conquered networks, half-corrupted data caches smuggled out before Earth had been abandoned. He wanted proof of weakness, confirmation of his empire's superiority. What he found instead hollowed him. The records unfurled across his private display. Footage of wars stretching across centuries. Trenches where men drowned in mud and fire. Cities obliterated by bombs that glared like miniature suns. Fleets clashing in orbit above their own world, missiles screaming through void and atmosphere alike. Again and again, humanity clawed through devastation, rebuilding, advancing, never surrendering to despair. Each conflict left scars, but also sharpened them. Kryvax leaned close to the screen, mandibles stiff. The humans were not pacifists. They were predators caged by circumstance, killers who had spent millennia perfecting survival in the crucible of their own violence. His claws tapped against the console in an erratic rhythm. The smell of ash seemed stronger in his quarters. He rubbed his throat, wondering if the cat's stench had finally infiltrated every level of the station, or if it was merely his imagination. He closed the file, but the images lingered, burning into his thoughts. If these creatures had endured such horrors on their own world, what would they unleash now, united, provoked? The next day, new reports arrived. Shipping lanes severed, Drexery supply depots erased, entire outposts found gutted with surgical precision. Not conquest, not chaos. Calculated dismantling. Kryvax's officers began to argue, their composure fraying. Some insisted it was impossible. Primitive humans could not wield such weapons. Others whispered that they had underestimated them, that the humans had hidden their true strength. Kryvax silenced them with a slash of his claws. Fear feeds fear. We will not give them that satisfaction. Humanity lacks the scale to confront us directly. Whatever weapons they wield, they will falter against the weight of our empire. But his voice carried less certainty than before, and the officers heard it. He could see the reflection of his own doubts mirrored in their eyes. Alone once more, he returned to the viewport. The stars stretched silent and infinite, yet he felt hunted beneath them. He could almost sense human eyes watching from the dark, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The memory of Alara's voice clung to him, sharper than any blade. Not rage, not desperation, simply inevitability. The cat's golden gaze haunted him as well, steady as the captain's, unblinking. He thought of spacing the creature, but dismissed it. Killing it now would feel like admission, acknowledgement that it had power over him. Instead, he left it alive, a decision that gnawed at him even as he tried to justify it as cruelty, as strategy. By the time the next fleet vanished, Kryvax no longer felt surprise. Only a slow, creeping dread. Something vast and terrible was unfolding beyond the edges of his understanding. The humans had been waiting, and now they were moving. He stood before the gathered officers, their eyes heavy with questions they did not dare voice. His mandibles clicked once, twice, then stilled. Humanity has revealed its teeth, he admitted at last, his tone low, grim. We will need every resource, every alliance, every measure to survive what comes next. No one laughed this time. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound, a silence that smelled of smoke and tasted of ash, as if the war had already arrived at their doorstep. And somewhere deep within the station, the cat stirred, pressed its face against the bars, and stared into the shadows as though it knew the shape of what was coming. The council chamber of the Drexery Empire gleamed with cold light, its vast dome meant to inspire awe. Kryvax stood in the center, every scale polished, every motion calculated to project strength. Yet beneath the veneer, his mind raced. The humans had dismantled 4 supply networks in less than a cycle, entire fleets reduced to silence, and still the council mocked his warnings. They are clever vermin, nothing more, declared Chancellor Vare, her tone dismissive as she waved her slender claws. Yes, they bite when cornered, but vermin always do. They cannot outlast us. They cannot rival the weight of centuries. Kryvax held his ground. You did not see their wars. I did. Their archives are soaked in fire. They do not fight like prey. They fight like predators who refuse extinction. He paused, letting the words cut. And worse, they have been patient. Do you not see? They let us believe we were winning. They lured us into arrogance. Laughter rippled through the chamber, not the hearty amusement of confidence, but the nervous mockery of those too afraid to face the truth. Another counselor hissed, you give them too much credit. Primitive worlds are all the same, loud in protest, fragile in resistance. We are the Drexery. We have ground civilizations far older than theirs into dust. Kryvax's mandibles tightened. He wanted to roar, to shake them until they understood the danger, but he knew such outbursts would only harden their denial. He bowed his head instead, concealing fury beneath deference. Then I pray you are correct, but I will not underestimate them again. The session adjourned with no change in course. The Empire would continue its raids, convinced humanity was bluffing. As Kryvax left the chamber, the echo of their laughter followed him like a noose. He knew then that the Empire's doom would not come from without alone. It would come from within, from pride so calcified it had become blindness. Back aboard his station, the first strike came. It began with silence, no alarms, no warning. A patrol of Drexery cruisers simply failed to return. Then the wormhole opened, a wound in space itself, and out of it poured ships unlike anything the Drexery had catalogued. Sleek, angular, gliding with eerie precision. They did not broadcast threats, nor waste time with spectacle. They moved like blades through flesh, cutting apart defense grids in minutes. Kryvax watched from the command deck, his crew trembling at their posts. Human vessels fanned out with mathematical efficiency, each strike placed with surgical accuracy. Where Drexery fleets relied on overwhelming force, the humans wielded inevitability. They did not boast, did not roar. They annihilated in silence. The admiral's mandibles ground together. He had warned the council. He had begged them to prepare. Now, their arrogance was burning before his eyes. "Deploy the interceptors," he barked. "Cut off their advance before they reach the inner ring." Ships scrambled, engines roaring, weapons blazing. Yet every maneuver the humans anticipated, as though they had rehearsed this battle countless times. Drexery torpedoes were intercepted mid-flight, their formations broken apart like brittle glass. Kryvax's claws dug into the railing as explosions lit the void. His empire's proud fleets were reduced to wreckage, drifting in silence. In the chaos, a squad of humans infiltrated the station. Kryvax learned of it only after a panicked report from a security division. Intruders had breached the lower wings, their movements too coordinated to repel. Minutes later came the confirmation. One of the squads had reached the wing, where the cat was held. For a heartbeat, Kryvax could only stare. Amid all the destruction, all the precision, humanity had still come for the creature. That animal he had dismissed as nothing. That hostage he had thought a tool of leverage. They retrieved it as though it were treasure, carried it away, while Drexery soldiers died in droves trying to stop them. A bitter sound escaped Kryvax's throat, half snarl, half laugh. They were not irrational. They were not sentimental fools. To them, the cat was not weakness, it was a symbol. Proof that nothing they loved would ever be surrendered. The battle raged on, the air thick with smoke and the screams of systems collapsing. Fire spread through the station, feeding the recycling units until the smell of ash was no longer imagined but real, clinging to every breath. Kryvax moved among his officers, steadying them, forcing order from the chaos. His authority had not crumbled yet, though he felt the cracks spidering through. When the last volley struck, the outer defenses collapsed entirely. Human ships held their fire then, circling the crippled station like predators that had already decided the kill was theirs. They did not finish it, not yet. Their silence was louder than any ultimatum. It was patience again, the same patience that had unnerved him since Alara's warning. On the deck, surrounded by exhausted and terrified subordinates, Kryvax whispered words not meant for them, but for himself. "We thought them prey. We thought them fragile." He stared out at the human fleet, shadows gliding in the starlight, calm as gods. "But it is we who were fragile. It is we who were blind." The smell of ash thickened, and for the first time, Admiral Kryvax no longer thought of the cat as a nuisance, nor as leverage. He thought of it as the omen it had always been, the harbinger his pride refused to recognize. And as the station burned, as the silence of humanity pressed in heavier than any weapon, he understood that the true war had only just begun. The station's hull groaned under the weight of silence. Smoke hung heavy in the command deck, dimming the glow of instruments that still flickered, stubborn against collapse. Admiral Kryvax stood at the viewport, shoulders hunched, mandibles drawn tight, his once proud reflection blurred by soot on the glass. Beyond him stretched the human fleet, unmoving, encircling, their guns quiet. They had won, and yet they did not finish the kill. That restraint unnerved him more than any weapon. It was not mercy, it was ownership. Reports came in broken fragments. Fleets routed, colonies abandoned, the Empire's borders collapsing like sand pulled into the tide. His subordinates no longer spoke of victory or strategy. Their eyes, once alight with arrogance, were hollow with dread. One young officer, scales dulled by ash, whispered, "Why do they not destroy us?" Kryvax had no answer. He could not admit what he felt, that humanity's silence was not hesitation, but judgment. Their patience had never been cowardice. It was calculation. They had studied his people long, before the Drexery thought to study them. And now they revealed themselves in measured cuts, dismantling an empire not only by force, but by terror. The broadcast arrived without ceremony. The whole screen crackled, and once again Captain Alara's face appeared, steady as stone. She did not gloat. She did not snarl. Her voice was calm, almost weary, as though she were delivering a sentence long ago decided. Cease hostilities. Submit your fleets. Or vanish. Those are your only terms. The words cut sharper than any blade. No promises of peace, no honeyed offers of alliance. Surrender or extinction, given with the same gravity one might use to state a mathematical fact. Kryvax searched her face for malice and found none. She did not look upon him as an equal, nor as an enemy to hate. She looked upon him as a problem to be solved. In that expression, he felt the full weight of his people's mistake. He had mocked her warning once. Now he knew it had not been a threat at all. It had been prophecy. The council surrendered in fragments. Some worlds capitulated instantly, their leaders scrambling to preserve scraps of power. Others resisted, and their fleets were erased in hours. By the end of a cycle, what had once been an empire of unyielding pride was reduced to scattered enclaves, their banners ash in the void. Humanity had not sought vengeance. They had sought control, and they had achieved it with precision that chilled even their victors. Kryvax was spared, not through mercy, not through oversight, but through deliberate choice. He was summoned aboard a human vessel where he expected execution. Instead, Ilara met him in Spartan chamber, her uniform immaculate, her posture iron. "You will govern," she said, handing him a datapad that contained the terms of his survival. "Your people will submit through you. Fail, and you will be replaced. Not killed, replaced. We do not waste tools." Kryvax studied her, the weight of humiliation pressing heavier than chains. Once he had believed himself a predator among prey. Now he stood as a conquered ruler, alive not because of his strength, but because the humans found him useful. A governor, not an admiral. A voice for a people who had silenced themselves with arrogance. He accepted the terms with a bow, though his mandibles ached from the effort. To resist was to doom his species entirely. To obey was to live, at least in the shadow of submission. When he returned to the wreck of his station, the smell still lingered. The engineers had scrubbed the vents, replaced filters, burned incense through the airlocks, yet it remained, faint, acrid, unyielding. The smell of ash. To Kryvax, it was no longer the stench of an animal, but the reminder of what had been lost. A scent that would haunt every breath of his reign under human rule. The cat had been returned to its owner, carried carefully aboard a human vessel, as though it were treasure beyond measure. The sight reached Kryvax through intercepted feeds, the small black creature curled in the captain's arms, golden eyes half closed, safe and unbowed. He stared at the image longer than he intended. To his soldiers, it was laughable that such a beast had sparked the downfall of their empire. To Kryvax, it was something else entirely. A symbol. Humanity had not fought for power alone. They had fought to protect what they cherished, no matter how small, no matter how trivial. In that devotion lay their strength, a strength the Drexery had never understood. Late in the cycle, Kryvax stood alone at the viewport once more, his reflection hollow-eyed against the infinite stars. He thought of his people, broken and scattered. He thought of humanity, now awakened, united, and looking outward with a focus that unsettled even him. They had not wanted war. That much he believed. But war had been given to them, and in taking it, they had found purpose. He whispered into the quiet, the words meant for no one but himself. We thought them sentimental. We thought their love made them fragile. But it is what makes them indestructible. His claws tapped once, twice, against the railing, and the galaxy will never know peace again. Outside, human fleets moved in disciplined formation, silent as the stars, engines burning like embers in the void. The war was over. The conquest had begun. And Admiral Kryvax, once conqueror, now servant, felt the weight of history shift around him, carried on the wings of creatures his people had mocked as prey. The station shuddered, its systems struggling against collapse, and the faint smell of ash lingered still, curling through every corridor, a reminder that the fire had only just started.